The steel was already hot enough to burn flesh when Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov climbed through the driver's hatch of the T-34 at 0430 hours on July the 12th, 1943. The tank's hull radiated heat from 2 days of continuous combat, the metal absorbing the brutal summer sun and the residual warmth from the engine that had barely cooled during their 3 hours of rest. Volkov was 26 years old, a former tractor mechanic from a collective farm outside Smolensk, who had been drafted in 1941 and had somehow survived 2 years of war that had killed almost everyone he had trained with. "She's running hot," reported Junior Sergeant Pavel Sokolov from the engine compartment, his hands black with oil and his face streaked with soot. Sokolov was 32, old for a tank crewman, a pre-war engineer who understood the T-34's V2 diesel engine better than the designers who had built it. Coolant's low, oil pressures marginal, and the transmission's making noises it shouldn't make. We've been in combat for 48 hours straight. This machine needs rest." "So do we," muttered Corporal Anatoly Petrov, the gunner, as he squeezed into the cramped turret. Petrov was 23, from Leningrad, a former art student whose hands were steady enough to paint miniatures, but now spent their days traversing a 76.2 mm gun toward German tanks. But the fascists didn't ask our opinion before launching Operation Citadel, did they? The fourth member of the crew, Private Ivan Koslov, the loader, was 19 years old and looked younger. He had joined them just 6 days ago, as a replacement for their previous loader, who had burned to death when a Panzer IV shell penetrated their armour at Oboyan. Koslov was terrified. Anyone could see it in his wide eyes and shaking hands. But he loaded shells faster than anyone Volkov had ever seen, driven by fear into mechanical efficiency. Their tank, number 237, was one of approximately 600 T-34s assigned to the 5th Guards Tank Army under General Rotmistrov. They were positioned near the town of Prokhorovka, part of a massive Soviet counterattack designed to blunt the German offensive that had been grinding through Soviet defences for 7 days. Intelligence reports indicated that the Germans had concentrated their elite Latin SS Panzer Corps in this sector, the Leibstandarte, Adolf Hitler, Das Reich and Totenkopf divisions, equipped with the new Tiger and Panther tanks that outgunned and outarmoured anything the Soviets possessed. Volkov had seen a Tiger tank exactly once, 3 days ago near Yakovlevo. It had destroyed 4 T-34s in less than 2 minutes, its 80mm gun punching through Soviet armour at ranges where the T-34's 76.2mm gun was useless. He had survived only because a Su-152 self-propelled gun had appeared from nowhere and blown the Tiger's turret completely off its chassis with a single 152mm shell. The image haunted his dreams during the brief hours when he managed to sleep. The Tiger's turret spinning through the air like a child's toy, trailing smoke and flame. "Comrade Lieutenant," said Captain Boris Andreev, their company commander, approaching through the pre-dawn darkness. Andreev was 29, a veteran of the Winter War against Finland who wore the Order of the Red Banner and walked with a slight limp from wounds received at Moscow in 1941. New orders from division. At 0800, we attack across the Pizel River Valley toward Hill 252.4. The fascists have concentrated their armour there. Maybe 300 tanks, including Tigers and Panthers. Our mission is to close with them, get inside their firing range where our guns can penetrate and destroy them. Close with Tigers. Sokolov's voice was flat. "Comrade Captain, our gun can't penetrate Tiger frontal armour even at point-blank range. We'd have to get beside them or behind them, and their guns can kill us at 2,000 metres. That's suicide." "That's war," Andreev replied simply. "We have numbers. They have quality. We overwhelm them with mass, sacrifice what we must, and hope enough of us survive to complete the mission." General Rotmistrov's exact words were, Steel, steel, steel. We are to become steel ourselves, drive forward regardless of losses, and break the German offensive through sheer momentum. Volkov looked at his crew. Sokolov's jaw was set, resignation in his eyes. Petrov was checking his gun sights with obsessive precision, the artist in him demanding perfect calibration even if it was futile. Kozlov looked like he might vomit. These were the men he would die with today, probably before noon, torn apart by an 88 mm shell that would turn their T-34 into a crematorium. "We'll be ready, Comrade Captain," Volkov heard himself say. What else was there to say? At 07:45, the Soviet artillery began its preparatory bombardment, hundreds of guns pounding the German positions with a sound like continuous thunder. Volkov stood in his commander's cupola, watching the horizon flash with explosions, black smoke rising to merge with the grey sky. Around him, 600 T-34s idled, their engines rumbling, crews making final preparations. Some men were praying, others were writing hurried letters to families they would never see again. A few stood apart, smoking and staring at nothing, already dead inside. At precisely 080, Captain Andreev's voice crackled over the radio. "All tanks, advance! Forward for the motherland!" Tank 237's engine roared as Volkov ordered full throttle. They surged forward with the first wave, a steel tide rolling across the steppe toward the German lines 4 kilometers away. The ground was flat, offering no cover, just sunflower fields and patches of scrub grass. Perfect killing ground for the German gunners. They had covered perhaps 1 kilometer when the first German shells began falling. A T-34 200 meters to Volkov's left simply disintegrated, hit by what must have been an 80 Meteormot armor-piercing round that detonated its ammunition. The explosion was so violent that pieces of the tank rained down across a 100-meter radius. Another tank erupted in flames, its crew bailing out while burning, human torches running a few desperate meters before collapsing. "Target! 11 o'clock, 2,000 meters!" Petrov shouted. "Panzer IV, hull down position." Volkov traversed the turret left, saw the German tank's angular silhouette barely visible behind a small rise. "Fire!" The 76.2 mm gun roared, the recoil rocking the T-34. Volkov watched the tracer streak toward the target, saw it impact harmlessly on the earth berm in front of the German tank. "Short! Add 200! Loading!" Kozlov screamed, ramming another shell home. "Up!" Petrov adjusted his sight. "Firing!" The second shot hit. Volkov saw the flash of impact on the Panzer IV's turret, saw it rock backward. But when the smoke cleared, the German tank was still there, traversing its gun toward them. Their shell had bounced off. "Evasive!" Volkov ordered, and Sokolov threw the tank hard left. The German shell passed through the space they had just occupied. So close Volkov could feel the displacement of air. They were inside 1,500 meters now, closing fast, the T-34's diesel engines screaming at full power. All around them, the battle had devolved into chaos. Hundreds of tanks, Soviet T-34s and German Panzers, Tigers and Panthers, intermingled in a melee at ranges from 2,000 meters down to hand-to-hand distance. The air was thick with smoke and dust, visibility dropping to a few hundred meters. Tanks burned everywhere, black pillars of smoke marking where crews had died. The radio was a cacophony of screams, orders, prayer S, and death. "Tiger! Tiger at 1 o'clock, 800 meters!" Petrov's voice cracked. The massive German heavy tank appeared through the smoke like a primordial monster, its long 88 mm gun sweeping across the battlefield. As Volkov watched, it fired, and a T-34 300 meters away exploded, its turret blown completely off. "We can't hurt it from the front," Volkov said, his mind racing. "Sokolov, hard right, flank speed. We get beside it or we die." The T-34 pivoted on its tracks, accelerating toward the Tiger's flank. The German commander saw them, began traversing the turret, but the Tiger's turret rotation was slow, powered by hydraulics that took precious seconds. It was a race. Could they reach the Tiger's vulnerable side before its gun could track them? 500 meters. 400. The Tiger's gun was coming around. 300 meters. Volkov could see the German commander in the cupola shouting orders. 200 meters. The 80 mm was almost aligned. Fire! Fire now! Petrov pulled the trigger at 150 meters, aiming for the Tiger's side armor where it was thinnest. The 76.2-meter shell struck home at a 90-degree angle, penetrated, exploded inside. The Tiger shuddered, smoke pouring from every hatch. Seconds later, it erupted as its ammunition cooked off, the explosion so massive it knocked Tank 237 sideways. "Kill confirmed," Petrov shouted, pumping his fist. "We killed a Tiger!" They had no time to celebrate. A Panther appeared directly ahead at 300 meters, its long 75mm gun already trained on them. Volkov saw the muzzle flash and braced for impact. The shell struck the T-34's frontal armor at an angle, and through some miracle of physics and metallurgy, it ricocheted off rather than penetrating, though the impact was like being inside a bell that someone had struck with a sledgehammer. Volkov's vision went white, his ears ringing, blood running from his nose. "Return fire! Return fire!" he screamed, though he could barely hear his own voice. Petrov, also bleeding from the concussion, lined up the shot by instinct more than sight. The gun fired. The shell hit the Panther's turret and bounced off. Kozlov loaded frantically. They fired again. Another ricochet. The Panther was traversing toward them for the killing shot. "Comrades, it's been an honor," Volkov began. Then a Soviet Su-152 self-propelled gun rumbled past them and fired its massive 152mm gun howitzer at the Panther. The German tank literally came apart under the impact, pieces flying in every direction. The Su-152 commander waved from his cupola and continued forward, hunting for more targets. For the next 3 hours, Tank 237 fought through a mechanized hell that defied description. They engaged 11 German tanks, destroyed 3 Panzer fours, and damaged 2 others, took 7 hits that miraculously failed to penetrate, and watched 17 Soviet tanks burn around them. The 76.2mm gun fired so continuously that the barrel began to overheat, the metal expanding, the rifling deforming from the heat. At 11 on Salus hours they paused behind a burning Panther to assess their situation. The gun barrel was glowing faintly red at the breech, visible even in daylight. The recoil mechanism was struggling, the hydraulic fluid thinned by heat. They had fired 63 rounds, more than their entire combat load, by scrounging ammunition from knocked-out tanks. "The gun's done," Petrov reported, his hands shaking as he checked the weapon. "The barrel's warped from heat. I can see it with my eyes. If we fire again, the shell might tumble or the barrel might split. We need to stop." "We can't stop," Volkov said. "The battle's still going. We keep fighting." "With what? A warped gun that might explode in our faces?" Volkov looked out across the battlefield. Through the smoke and dust, he could see German tanks still maneuvering, still firing, still killing Soviet crews. To their right, a T-34 burned, its crew climbing out through the flames. To their left, a Tiger methodically destroyed 3 T-34s in 90 seconds, each shot a kill. And everywhere were burning tanks, dead men, everywhere were burning tanks, dead men, the detritus of mechanized warfare on an industrial scale. "We fight until we can't," Volkov decided. "One more engagement. We find one more target, we kill it, and then we reassess." That target appeared 5 minutes later. a Panzer IV at 400 meters, its crew focused on a burning T-34, preparing to finish off the survivors as they bailed out. It was the kind of casual murder that had become routine in this battle, German tankers shooting defenseless men as they climbed from burning vehicles. "Target acquired," Petrov said, his voice hollow. "Permission to engage." "Fire!" The gun roared for the 64th time. The overheated barrel flexed visibly under the stress. The metal expanded beyond its tolerances. The shell tumbled as it left the barrel, the warped rifling unable to stabilize it properly. But at 400 meters, even a tumbling shell was deadly. It struck the Panzer IV's turret ring, the vulnerable joint between turret and hull, and penetrated. The German tank erupted, ammunition cooking off in a chain reaction that blew the turret 30 meters into the air. "Hit! We—" Petrov never finished the sentence. The gun barrel split. The overheated, warped metal gave way under the pressure of firing, tearing open along its length like a peeled banana. Superheated gas and metal fragments exploded backward into the turret. Petrov screamed as shrapnel tore into his left arm and face. Kozlov was thrown against the turret wall, unconscious. Volkov felt something hot slash across his shoulder, but barely registered the pain through the adrenaline. "Guns destroyed!" Sokolov shouted from the driver's position. "We're done! We have to withdraw!" Volkov looked at the battlefield through eyes that stung with smoke and blood. The battle still raged. Tanks maneuvering, firing, dying. But Tank 237 was finished. Their gun was a twisted ruin of molten steel. Their loader was unconscious. Their gunner was bleeding heavily. They had no more ammunition anyway, having expended everything they could scavenge. "Fall back," Volkov ordered, the words tasting like defeat, even though he knew it was the only sane decision. "Get us to the rally point." The drive back was a nightmare journey through hell. They passed dozens of burning tanks, T-34s, T-70s, the occasional German Panzer or Tiger. Bodies lay scattered across the steppe, some still moving, most not. Wounded men called for help that wouldn't come. The wounded tank itself groaned and rattled, its engine misfiring, its transmission grinding, held together by willpower and Sokolov's mechanical genius. They reached the Soviet lines at 14 hours, 6 hours after the battle had begun. Of the 42 tanks in their battalion that had started the attack, 11 returned. Tank 237 was the only one that hadn't lost any crew members to death, though Petrov would lose his left eye and Kozlov would spend 3 weeks in a field hospital recovering from his concussion. The medics took the wounded. The mechanics descended on the surviving tanks like scavengers, salvaging what could be salvaged, marking others for scrap. A young lieutenant from battalion headquarters approached Volkov as he sat on the ground beside his ruined tank, too exhausted to move. "Lieutenant Volkov, I'm to debrief you. How many enemy vehicles destroyed?" Volkov tried to count. The Panzer IVs, the Tiger, the final kill before their gun failed. 6 confirmed, maybe 7. I lost count. Ammunition expended? All of it, and then some. We were pulling shells from knocked-out tanks. We fired until the gun melted. Volkov laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Literally melted. The barrel split from overheating. That's how long we fought. The lieutenant made notes. "You'll receive commendations. Your crew fought with distinction. The 5th Guards Tank Army's attack achieved its objective. The German offensive has been blunted. We lost approximately 300 tanks today, but the Germans have been stopped. Operation Citadel is finished. 300 tanks, 1,500 men, minimum. Dead or wounded or burned beyond recognition, sacrificed to stop the German offensive. And it had worked. The intelligence reports coming in throughout the afternoon confirmed that the German 2 SS Panzer Corps was withdrawing, their momentum broken, their offensive capability shattered. But the price. Always the price. Volkov found his crew that evening in the field hospital. Petrov lay on a cot with bandages covering half his face, his left eye gone, but his right still bright with the artist's vision that had made him such a good gunner. Koslov sat beside him, pale and shaky, but alive. Sokolov had refused treatment for his minor wounds and was already back at the tank park, helping salvage what could be saved from Tank 237. "Will we get another tank?" Koslov asked quietly. "Another assignment?" "Probably," Volkov replied. "The war isn't over. We're still needed." "I don't know if I can do that again," the young loader admitted. "Today, I've never been so afraid in my life. And we're supposed to do it again tomorrow, and the day after, until one of those German shells finally gets through our armour and we burn like all those other crews." Volkov had no answer for that, because Koslov was right. Their survival today had been luck more than skill, chance more than courage. Tomorrow the odds might fall differently. Next week or next month they might be the ones burning while another crew drove past, too focused on their own survival to stop and help. "We do it because someone has to," Petrov said from his cot, his voice slurred by the morphine but still clear. "We do it because if we don't stop them here, they keep advancing. They take more land, kill more people, burn more cities. So we climb into our steel coffins every morning and we fight. And some of us die, but enough of us live to push them back. That's the only answer I have." In the months that followed, Tank 237 was repaired, given a new gun barrel, and returned to service. Volkov's crew received new orders, fought in new battles, survived engagements that should have killed them, and mourned friends who didn't survive. The Battle of Kursk became a turning point, Germany's last major offensive on the Eastern Front, blunted by Soviet determination and blood. The Wehrmacht would never again possess the strength to launch such an attack. From Kursk forward, the Soviets advanced, mile by bloody mile, all the way to Berlin. But on July the 12th, 1943, none of that was certain. On that day, 4 men in a T-34 fought until their gun barrel literally melted from overheating, fired 64 rounds in 6 hours of continuous combat, survived 7 hits that should have killed them, and helped stop the German offensive through sheer refusal to quit. Their names don't appear in most history books. Tank 237 isn't memorialized in any museum. But their story, repeated thousands of times across the Kursk salient, is why Germany lost the war. Sometimes courage isn't about grand gestures or dramatic last stands. Sometimes it's about continuing to fight when your gun is overheating, when your hands are shaking with exhaustion, when you know the next enemy shell might turn your tank into a crematorium. Sometimes it's about loading one more round, firing one more shot, surviving one more minute, because that's all you can do. Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov survived the war. He returned to his collective farm in 1946, married, had 3 children, and lived until 1989, dying just months before the Soviet Union he had fought to defend began to crumble. He rarely spoke about the war, but on the anniversary of Prokhorovka, he would take out a twisted piece of steel, a fragment of Tank 237's gun barrel, salvaged when the tank was scrapped, and remember the day they fought until the gun melted. His grandson once asked what the war had taught him. Volkov thought for a long time before answering. That steel can melt, that men can break, but sometimes, somehow, we keep fighting anyway. Not because we're heroes, but because giving up would mean everything we've already endured was for nothing. So we load one more shell, fire one more shot, and pray we live to see tomorrow. That fragment of gun barrel, warped and heat-scarred, sits now in a small museum in Prokhorovka, labelled simply, "From T-34 Dobra 237, July 12, 1943, the gun that melted." And for those who understand what that means, No other explanation is necessary.